Thousands of angry protesters have taken to the streets of Kazakhstan in recent days, the biggest crisis to shake the autocratic country in decades. The events are a stark challenge to President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev less than 3 years into his rule and are destabilizing an already volatile region where Russia and the United States compete for influence. On the other side, the Moscow-led Collective Security Treaty Organization says Russian paratroopers have been deployed to Kazakhstan at the request of the government in the capital to help stabilize the situation. Anger boiled over when the government lifted price caps for liquefied petroleum gas, a low-carbon fuel that many Kazakhs use to power their cars. But the protests have more deep-seated roots, including anger at social and economic disparities, exacerbated by a raging pandemic, as well as the lack of real democracy. The average salary in Kazakhstan is the equivalent of $570 a month, according to the government statistics, though many people earn far less. As the country's rich elite took off in their private jets, the revolution, sparked in part by hiked-up fuel prices, showed no signs of slowing down. Protesters have set administrative buildings on fire in several big cities across the country, disarmed cops, torn epaulets off of police uniforms, and demanded an end to the 3-decade-long career of Nursultan Nazarbayev, the powerful head of the country's National Security Council and a longtime Putin ally. Moscow descends into a panic every time such protests threaten to end old regimes, and has done so ever since Hillary Clinton called for the US to figure out effective ways to slow down or prevent Putin's efforts to re-Sovietize former USSR territories like Kazakhstan. After Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev dismissed Nazarbayev from the top position at the National Security Council, there was no doubt left that the old regime, including Putin's closest ally in the country, had fallen. A surefire sign of Moscow's concern about Kazakhstan emerged when the chairman of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, led by Russia, declared the organization would send troops at Tokayev's request to assist Kazakhstan in overcoming this threat. The announcement came after Kazakh authorities imposed a nationwide state of emergency and sent military units to fight what Tokayev called terrorist bands. In the country's largest city and former capital, Almaty, demonstrators had seized the international airport and set fire to the presidential residence and city hall. Nazarbayev's cult of personality seemed untouchable even last week, when he met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. But social issues, including unemployment, poverty, and an abrupt increase in fuel prices seemed to have marked a breaking point for the people of Kazakhstan, who engaged in violent clashes with police across the country this week. In a short time, Kazakh protesters had taken over the country's major places in the capital city after reports that the internet had been shut down, and a crowd of protesters tried to demolish a massive Nazarbayev monument. Hundreds have been wounded and 8 have been killed so far. Until recently, state power in Kazakhstan was divided between Nazarbayev and his hand-picked President Tokayev. But a flurry of top officials have been pushed out, including Nazarbayev and his nephew Samat Abish, the first deputy head of the National Security Committee. Moscow has long viewed Kazakhstan, the largest economy in Central Asia, as an important strategic partner. Kazakhstan is a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, a military alliance that originated from the Soviet armed forces. Russia's border with Kazakhstan, a Muslim nation with a population of over 18 million people, is 4,450 miles long, and neither Russians nor Kazakhs need visas to visit each other's countries. Instability in the region, or disloyalty to the Kremlin, could be a devastating strategic roadblock to Moscow. Russian nationalists, including novelist and politician Zakir Prilpin, have resorted to a familiar strategy of blaming the West for the situation in Kazakhstan. He said, foreign agents were well prepared. The Russian statements used more cautious language than Tokayev, who has blamed the violence on domestic and foreign provocateurs.
Атаковать служебные помещения гражданских и военных ведомств являются абсолютно незаконными. Это преступление, за которым может последовать наказание.
Though Nazarbayev is now out, and the Kazakh acting government has announced plans to reintroduce some fuel price caps, the unrest is ongoing and crowds are furious over the brutality exhibited by state police. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that Kazakhstan could solve its own problems and it was important that no one interfered from the outside. He also said Kazakhstan had not requested Russian help to deal with protests, triggered by a fuel price increase, that prompted the resignation of its government. Russia is acutely sensitive to unrest in former Soviet republics it regards as part of its sphere of influence, and in the past has accused the West of stoking revolutions in countries such as Georgia and Ukraine. Russia's foreign ministry said it was closely monitoring the situation in its southern neighbor and counting on the soonest possible normalization. Sandwiched between Russia and China, Kazakhstan is the world's largest landlocked country, bigger than the whole of Western Europe. The protests are also significant as Kazakhstan has been aligned with Russia, whose president, Vladimir Putin, views the country, a body double of sorts for Russia in terms of its economic and political systems, as part of Russia's sphere of influence. For the Kremlin, the events represent another possible challenge to autocratic power in a neighboring country. This is the third uprising against an authoritarian, Kremlin-aligned nation, following pro-democracy protests in Ukraine in 2014 and in Belarus in 2020. The chaos threatens to undermine Moscow's sway in the region at a time when Russia is trying to assert its economic and geopolitical power in countries like Ukraine and Belarus. The countries of the former Soviet Union are also watching the protests closely, and the events in Kazakhstan could help energize opposition forces elsewhere. Kazakhstan also matters to the United States, as it has become a significant country for American energy concerns, with ExxonMobil and Chevron having invested tens of billions of dollars in western Kazakhstan. Although it has close ties with Moscow, consecutive Kazakh governments always maintained close relationship with the United States, with energy investment seen as a counterweight to Russian influence. The United States government has long been less critical of post-Soviet authoritarianism in Kazakhstan than in Russia and Belarus. Less than 3 years ago, Kazakhstan's aging president Nursultan Nazarbayev resigned. A former steelworker and Communist Party leader, he rose to power in Kazakhstan in 1989, when it was still part of the Soviet Union. During his rule, he attracted enormous investments from foreign energy companies to develop the nation's oil reserves, which, at an estimated 30 billion barrels, are among the largest of all the former Soviet republics. The last surviving president in Central Asia to have steered his country to independence after the Soviet Union collapsed, he handed power in 2019 to Tokayev, then Speaker of the upper house of the parliament and a former prime minister and foreign minister. Tokayev is widely perceived as the handpicked successor of Nazarbayev, who until recently was thought to wield considerable power, holding the title leader of the nation, and serving as chairman of the country's Security Council. But the revolt could be a decisive break with his rule. The new president, while a loyalist, has nevertheless been trying to carve out a stronger role for himself. That has disoriented Kazakhstan's bureaucracy and elites, and contributed to the government's slow reaction to the protesters' demands.
Бірігіп, бір тудың астына жиналатын кез келді. Алға Қазақ!